Close that item, we move on to our final item from our regular agenda, which is a consideration of the future use and restriping of the Linda Beach tennis courts and a recommended action. Again, this is not our first rodeo, so we did revisit this item at our previous meeting and had asked staff to come back, so this is a follow-on. So I'm hoping to really address any new information or new thinking that has come forward. And again, I want to just take a moment to thank the neighbors who have been deeply involved. I want to thank my colleagues for the countless hundreds of hours that you have all put in terms of reading and responding to emails, doing outreach, doing backyard tours and listening sessions. So thank you all for the hours you've put in. Thank you to staff for your thoughtfulness and creativity in putting together a recommendation for us, which in the end may not make anyone particularly happy, but hopefully does move us forward in terms of how we think about this particular decision before us tonight. So huge thank you to the community for all of your efforts and for your professionalism and for your grace and kindness that you've brought to this. And I hope we can continue that tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanaugh. I do have a number of brief remarks that I'd like to share and provide an opportunity to Recreation Director Putzer to provide a chronology of events before we hand off to Council for further discussion and public comments. The future use of Linda Beach courts has been a topic of extensive study and discussion. The Recreation Commission and its subcommittee have given hours of attention to the subject alongside fellow residents who care deeply about the future use of Linda Beach. I would like to acknowledge everyone who has participated in the process and contributed to the body of work that has gotten us to where we are tonight. On August 7th, the city staff proposed that the pickleball community and concerned neighbors each advance a single representative to work in a committee format with city staff. With the support of the city council, a working group formed. This group included a neighborhood representative, Kara Christensen, a pickleball representative, Jeff Trowbridge, the recreation director, Shelley Putzer, and I. We were all participants in the process. The desired outcomes that city staff defined for the working group were to optimize community resources, identify opportunities for compromise, support respectful coexistence, and inform the staff recommendation that's actually before you this evening. Several dimensions of good neighbor policies were explored, from scheduling arrangements to equipment to physical installation of sound barriers. However, the greatest stumbling block was opposition to any increase beyond the existing 9 hours of pickleball play per week. Every alternative was unfortunately rejected when it accompanied the prospect of dedicated pickleball courts, which severely limited the opportunities for the working groups, dialogue, and compromise. So presented to you this evening for your consideration is staff's recommendation in the following form. There are a number of subsections to this recommendation, and so I ask you to just please bear with me as I summarize what is contained in the staff report. So the first part of the recommendation is to dedicate and restripe Linda Beach tennis courts for pickleball play and allow for youth programming to advance both tennis and pickleball skill building for ages up to 11 years old, and to find the restriping and repairs exempt under CEQA guidelines sections 15301, 15304, 15232, and 15601B3. We are also recommending to establish maximum court use as follows, effective immediately. On Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Friday, and Saturday, it is recommended that adult pickleball open play take place between 9 and 6 p.m. On Wednesdays, it is recommended that a period from 2 to 6 p.m. for youth-only programming be provided. Otherwise, adult pickleball open play will not exist on Wednesdays. On Sundays, it is recommended that a reduced schedule of 9 to 3 p.m. for adult pickleball open play be considered by the council. It is noted that during daylight savings time, staff proposes the extension of up to 1 hour to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And it is also noted that during school breaks, the time of youth-only play, which is currently presented as a 4-hour window, may change in terms of the time of day it occurs, but not exceed the 4 hours of youth-only activity. The third recommendation that's presented to you this evening is to require the use of city-approved low-noise equipment per a list that the Recreation Department will post at the courts. It is also recommended that adult pickleball play fee scenarios be evaluated by the City Council and presented in the form of an action item within 6 months or less, but 6 months being that outer period. It is next recommended that a progress update be provided to the City Council in 6 months' time, and that we revisit maximum court use on an annual basis at Linda Beach. In recognition of the history and process undertaken to date, City staff's recommendation seeks to consider all of the facts, analysis, opinions, and perspectives presented. The proposed hours for court use reduce open play to 61% of the trial period. And again, I want to emphasize that it's a reduction of open play hours to 61% of the trial period. I know that statistic in particular has been a subject of some public comments, so I want to be sure that that is clearly stated. The proposed hours also reduce the Recreation Commission's recommendation by 19%. Designating a day for youth programming to promote tennis and pickleball skill building reflects community input received throughout this process, and also presents the additional benefit of reducing the level of overall activity at Linda Beach during daylight hours this single day of the week on Wednesdays. So we do anticipate that activity associated with Wednesday play will be significantly reduced when compared against the adult open play hours. So at this point, I would like to turn over to Director Putzer to walk us through a brief chronology of events. I know there's a great deal of background information that's contained as an attachment to the staff report. So really what we hope to do is sketch some major features as a refresher for our community and council this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, a brief walk backwards in history of how this item came to you. The desire for a place to play pickleball in Piedmont started around 2017 with a dedicated group of enthusiasts. In response to requests for a place to play, the Recreation Commission decided to form a subcommittee in May of 2018 to review tennis facilities programming, as well as how to address and accommodate the growing interest in pickleball. That subcommittee's work from May 2018 to January 2020 resulted in a partnership with the school district to renovate the PMS courts and add lines for pickleball in August of 2019. And following an 8-month trial, trial of play at Hampton and Beach in 2019, City Council approved dedicated pickleball hours of play at both locations in January of 2020. Those times were Linda Beach Tuesday, Thursdays, 10 to 1 p.m., Hampton Wednesday, Friday, 12:30 to 3, and the PMS courts were Saturday, 10 a.m. to 1, and Sunday, 1 to 4. Since 2020, the popularity and demand for pickleball in Piedmont has exceeded available time slots. Across the 3 sites where pickleball is played in Piedmont, prior to the trial, players experienced full courts and anywhere from 16 to 30 people waiting to play. In February 2022, hours of play were expanded at all 3 sites to meet some of the demand of pickleball. Players were requesting more overall court time and time in the evenings for those who work. The hours were extended by an additional day at Beach and an additional 30 minutes at Hampton on those 2 days, and at the PMS courts, Saturday and Sunday both moved to 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The much-needed court repairs and resurfacing of the beach courts were included in the 2022-23 fiscal year budget In September of 2022, the Rec Commission considered forming a subcommittee to look at possible expansion of pickleball play at beach courts prior to the resurfacing and restriping project. While the subcommittee was not formed, the Rec Commission directed staff to move forward with a trial of dedicated pickleball play at beach with the goal of better understanding demand and gather data to make a recommendation about the restriping of the courts. In January of 2023, letters were sent to approximately 300 homes surrounding beach courts, notifying them of the proposed trial. In response to initial feedback about loss of tennis availability at Linda beach courts and neighbor notification concerns, the Recreation Commission decided to fully reconsider the trial and parameters at their February meeting. The Commission received 88 written correspondence prior to the meeting and 32 public comments at the meeting. The Commission ultimately approved moving forward with the trial and the trial parameters for pickleball play at beach. The 5-month trial began on March 1st and ran through July 31st. Hours were 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday. Times for pickleball play at Hampton were suspended to allow for more tennis play, and pickleball hours at the PMS courts were extended from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekends. Players were asked to check in, respond to a short survey to track number of players at the courts, their resident, non-resident, mode of transportation to the courts, and how long they were playing when they were at the courts. And throughout the trial, the Commission received and reviewed hundreds of written comments and 90 public comments at meetings, petitions, and player statements. At the April Recreation Commission meeting, the Commission voted to form a subcommittee to review concerns, issues, and data collected during the trial, to develop criteria to aid the Commission in making a recommendation on the restriping of the courts. In reviewing community feedback, the subcommittee found several common themes expressed by both sides of the issue, and the subcommittee used these themes to develop a framework of criteria that would be used to aid the Commission in making a recommendation to Council. At the May Recreation Commission meeting, the subcommittee proposed structuring the evaluation of the Linda Beach courts restriping based on 3 criteria, which were safety, noise, and best use of space. Between May and July, the subcommittee met numerous times to collect and analyze information associated with the 3 criteria, including interviews, usage data, community survey results, and community input. The subcommittee's approach to the criteria for safety were to interview police, city staff, school district. The speed trailer was deployed to collect traffic data, and the usage data was analyzed by an outside traffic engineer. A noise study was conducted. They conducted interviews, corresponded with school district and beach personnel, police, and schoolmate staff, and reviewed community member input from the trial. And best use of space looked at reservation data. It also looked at the impact of the trial on availability of tennis while the trial was going on. The QR codes data was used to look at popular times of play and consistency during the week at beach. The subcommittee also released a community survey inviting responses on how the trial affected their recreational activity choices, specifically tennis and pickleball play. And the survey received 810 responses with 563 open-ended comments, all reviewed by the subcommittee. Based upon their findings associated with the 3 criteria, the subcommittee concluded that there was no evidence that pickleball play had created a safety hazard at beach school. They found that a significantly greater number of people would be able to play pickleball on the courts than tennis or other recreational activities. And lastly, while the sound study did not find pickleball noise to exceed standards set forth by the general plan or municipal code, the subcommittee concluded that additional noise reduction strategies could be considered to further reduce pickleball sound in the neighborhood. That at the July Recreation Commission meeting, the subcommittee presented their report and recommendations to the full commission. And after considering the report, recommendations, and community input, the Rec Commission approved the subcommittee's report with slight modifications to the recommendations. Those recommendations from the Recreation Commission were presented to the Council on August 7th and considered by the Council. And I think that brings us up to possibly today's date and what Administrator Diane Moore has added about what has taken place since the August 7th meeting. With that, I will turn it back to you, I believe.
So that does conclude our staff remarks. We are certainly here to support council in your discussion and deliberations and address any further questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. With that, we'll open it up first for any questions of staff, and then we'll open it up to the public for comment. And just for folks who are preparing comments, We'll do a check-in on comments, but we will likely limit comments to 2 minutes per speaker again tonight, as we did at our last meeting, on a topic that has robust interest, just for folks to kind of think through their comments, and then we'll come back to council for deliberation. Question?
So I do have a question. I actually have more than one question, but on the Recreation Commission recommendations, the recommendation number 4 was to encourage pickleball play at the PMS sports courts, and asking that staff work with PSG to maximize time available for pickleball play at those courts, especially in the late afternoon and evening. And I'm wondering if our city staff can talk a little bit more about that recommendation and how that might be implemented going forward.
Excuse me. Yes, yes, we've already begun that engagement with the school district in requesting evening court use, which is taking place. So we're hoping that that can be a schedule that we can use more often. Right, currently the request is it's a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday 5 to 8, and a Wednesday, Friday 6 to 8, with Saturday and Sundays from 9 to 5. We request the use through the school district, and so they have to approve our request, just like all of our other requests for facility use. And so they have received our request up until December, and they will be approving those on a monthly basis.
Okay. And is that the same as how you work with the district on other shared spaces?
Yes, pretty much, yes, except for the monthly use at the sports courts. Otherwise, we will submit for classes and programs or other facility requests. We do submit it through them, and they have to approve those uses, yes.
Okay. So at any given time, if we're just kind of going month by month, is that fair to say?
Yes, which is a little bit of a new process, but that's where we prepared it, and we've already made those requests, so we'll be following up to make sure that it takes place. It just allows the school district the chance, if they have something come up and they need to schedule it, that maybe they forgot or something happened during or right after school, that they have that ability to add that to the calendar.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah, please.
Director Putzer, how do we then notify potential users of what the availability is on a month-to-month basis?
We hope that it would be consistent, what's approved, where we post the hours on the city's website, but we'll have to kind of take an extra step to make sure that we're announcing those hours if they were to change, to make sure people are informed. But it could be a little tricky if a certain day or a few days change in the hours.
Mm-hmm.
Follow-up to my question. I'm wondering about holidays and school breaks, because I could see those potentially, not necessarily monthly, but there are quite a few school breaks throughout the year, and then obviously there's a long summer break.
We've been able to use it during breaks, but official holidays, when the school is closed, then none of our programs can operate on a school site during an official holiday.
Really? Yeah. And do you,
An observed holiday.
okay.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up to these questions, which is when we're using the middle school courts, are we considering those in lieu of using them somewhere else, or is it in addition to having time somewhere else?
There's an addition.
Okay.
Yeah. The demand is fairly high, and so using as much space as we can to accommodate that, that's the intent of that.
And that would be our plan moving forward.
Yes.
That if we were able to schedule more hours at other facilities, it would be not in lieu of any of the current places where pickleball is being played. Can you talk a little bit about Hampton's hours and sort of how we've arrived at whatever is happening at Hampton?
Of Hampton's current hours,
Yeah.
Wednesday, Friday, 12 to 3. Well, just for my historical look back, that has been the hours that were established through that process. And the small expansion happened in February 2022, which we added an additional, which is an hour a week to that facility. But that's basically how the hours were established at that point by council.
Okay, and those hours are not being visited tonight?
No, I don't believe that's.
I have more questions.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
So my recollection is, and I'm happy to be corrected, that those Hampton hours were set to allow the tennis players who use those courts, which they consider to be regulation and competition-sized courts in their world, that they can acclimate to that. That's my recollection of how those hours came to be, because it worked around what was already being used for tennis, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
You have other questions?
Yes, just-
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The working group was meeting to discuss mitigation measures. Just to clarify, there were no agreed upon mitigations either in terms of hours and/or physical mitigation.
Correct. The framing of the work of the working group was, should pickleball become a dedicated use at Linda Beach Courts, what mitigation, if any, would be part of future coexistence? And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to reach agreement along any number of dimensions, whether it was time of day, days of the week, or installation of sound dampening material.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Okay. I have more questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Another recommendation was talking about signage near the courts. And just curious, because I didn't see that translate over to our council list. But this was about kind of loading and unloading zones.
In the subcommittee's work and looking at that area, there are some signs that have different information. They all speak to loading in certain times, but I think maybe as the school's schedule has shifted, the signs may not be consistent. So maybe just taking a look to make sure they're consistent with what hours those loading zones are and how long they are.
Okay.
Just make sure they're more clear for,
That's on our radar.
yes.
Great.
Can you tell us how enforcement has been working to date? We've heard from many residents that there are times when there are people on the courts when they aren't supposed to be on the courts. Can you tell us what capacity, what ability we have to manage that? And also vis-a-vis, any equipment we might be requiring of players.
So just want to suggest that you make reference to the locking and unlocking as well.
Oh, yes. Going back to the pre-trial hours, we've been trying to communicate how those hours have been changed. We have found that some people may not understand that you can't just play pickleball over the tennis net, so some of those things have been happening. We provided our number during business hours. This is kind of what's happening currently in the situation, but also that goes right to my staff person, Liam Kelly, who has received calls, and he goes out personally to inspect those situations or find out kind of what happened. Some of it's communication of the people just not understanding how the pickleball is set up, and that you can't just play pickleball on the tennis court at any time. So we've been working to resolve some of that confusion. But I think moving forward, the gates at the courts have been equipped with an auto-locking gate, so they will be set on a timer in terms of when they open and close. And so just like most of our other facilities, if someone is there past a posted time, and if it's outside of our office hours, there's a non-emergency number that people would say, people are on X, Y, and Z field past the posted hours. So there's some of that.
Okay, thank you. And can you elaborate on how you arrived at 51 hours and plus the daylight savings time for us?
So the schedule that's proposed attempts to address a number of features relative to discussion that has taken place over an extensive period of time. We found in listening to the comments received from the public that there was maybe some value in considering a day of quiet, even though we couldn't get the working group to arrive at a place where that was a joint recommendation. We did hear that feature echoed in comments that came forward in a variety of settings here in council chambers. So the Wednesday was identified as a window for a couple of reasons. That day in particular happens to coincide with youth programming that's offered citywide, typically on a Monday, Wednesday format. It is also an early release day for PUSD students. We saw a chance to combine some other than pickleball activities at the court and promote tennis play in a meaningful way on the Linden Beach courts. So we found a space that we could both assure a reduced level of sound in the community because it's fewer hours of operation, and also promote the idea of the courts being put to purposes that were broader than just pickleball. The 9 to 6 format, there were a number of different program alternatives that have been part of a variety of recommendations that have come forward. We saw in previous discussion mention of a 10 a.m. start date, sometimes 9. We arrived at 9 a.m. for consistency, so it's not confusing to the public what the period of time is. And then when we considered a shorter day, which is what you see in the Sunday window, the goal was to maintain the same start time, so it's obvious that it's always 9. We thought that was beneficial for the public to understand hours of operation and reduce the amount of confusion associated with when play would be acceptable. Some other features that were considered along the way and why daylight savings time was introduced. In the item that appeared before the council in August, we heard lots of feedback on the proposed rec commission recommendation not giving enough weight or consideration to players who are engaged in daylight work and only have recreation activity at the end of the day. So what we attempted to do is find some middle ground for extending the end time to a bit later, recognizing that daylight savings time only exists for a certain portion of the year, albeit a greater portion of the year than when it isn't daylight savings time. But we will be losing hours of play based on darkness and the lack of lights throughout the year. So we figured it was a way to kind of balance out and still achieve 51 hours of play on average for adult open play. So those were some of the reasons why those subset remarks were included in the table for the council's consideration, looking for ways to echo both what pickleball players have said would be useful in terms of hours of play, and also recognize that maybe some weekend reduction would be valuable to the neighboring community, and a day of quiet midweek also had its upside, including that youth programming may not have that same level of sound associated with play for a shorter window when the programming would take place.
Okay, thank you.
So a follow-up question. Yeah. So when we, in the staff report, the adult pickleball open play, that's not just for 18 and up. I just wanted to kind of ask you to clarify that term adult, because in August we did hear from some high schoolers who may or may not have been 18, who certainly expressed an interest in playing pickleball.
So youth would be certainly available to join in pickleball play during adult pickleball hours. I think the distinction on the Wednesday versus every other day of the week is skill building is possible for age groups that are 11 and under based on standards for both tennis and pickleball. So the goal was to draw that distinction on Wednesdays. It's only for youth, and it's really 11 and under programmed activity that PRD is going to be scheduling in advance. So when PRD is not scheduling programming there is no pickleball play on Wednesdays at the court. Every other day that is promoting open play and labeled as adult would continue to have the same flexibility for youth or adult play. So maybe there are some ways we could more clearly represent that, but that was really the intention in that scheduling format.
Thank you.
Can I shift for a minute to the equipment question? Because we did have some concerns about noise levels coming from equipment that we didn't approve and how we would monitor that. Now, can you speak to that, please?
So we do intend, as part of the recommendation, should council move forward, to honor some of the features that are embedded in the Salter memorandum about good neighbor practices. This is an area that is evolving. So the best list that we have currently would be part of what we post on site, and we encourage compliance with. We also have pledges from the pickleball community to be engaged in the self-policing necessary to really kind of raise the bar and create that norm if it doesn't already exist. With reference to ongoing observations of equipment that isn't authorized, that complete process that Director Putzer described a little bit earlier this evening would still be the manner in which complaints would be reported. And if we have the ability to call out staff to do a visual confirmation of an issue and an intervention, we certainly would carry out that work in that fashion.
Thank you.
One last question. One of the recommendations is to evaluate adult pickleball fee scenarios. Can you describe for us what you all may be envisioning by way of fee? I know that there's been quite a bit of robust discussion about open play versus fee, or both, some combination. So if you can tell us what you're anticipating and why the time frame.
Sure, and so maybe I'll do a rough sketch, and Director Putzer might fill in some details. So there isn't a predetermined outcome for what the fee scenario would be, but we would be looking for different models that exist, and there are many in our very region that either resemble a per adult player format or a contribution based on the size of the pickleball community. There are different vehicles that can be used for gaining that same number of dollars on an annual basis. So we want to have our minds open to what the form will be and come to the council with a number of scenarios for your consideration. We do draw some distinctions relative to youth versus adult. The goal would not be to charge youth for pickleball in the same fashion that we do not have charges associated with tennis decals. So, and why the 6-month time frame? And I am concerned about stating this in a way that will be a disappointment. But I think when we look at finalizing our design for the pickleball courts, going out to bid, awarding, renovating, and bringing the property back online, we really are looking at a 6-month scenario because of the Thanksgiving and end of year holidays. And so we're thinking by March of next year, renovation complete. Important to have the fee scenario clearly established and adopted and in play. And if we can get it done in advance of that, we will be here at council presenting those recommended approaches for your consideration.
No, that's good.
Great. Also, can you speak to lessons? I know we have a robust lesson program for high school, and we've done some pickleball lessons, but I know we're obviously space constrained, and my concern is twofold. One, wanting to offer lessons, and I know there's a lot of demand for that, but my concern being using our same space, which means we're going to push open play off and set those aside for lessons. So I'm curious if we can think about Hampton as potential programming for something like that, but how are we thinking about that, and can that be revenue generating? And how can we meet the needs of pickleball players? Because I know right now a lot of the pickleball community is bearing that load by offering, essentially free lessons to newcomers.
That is true. There are a lot of lessons that happen when you show up. The PRD has offered actually classes that are like one-day workshops where it's a fee class, in the past. We've kind of just tried to figure out locations that wouldn't interrupt dedicated play. Those tended to be different hours at PMS, but we haven't really sat down to map out how we would accomplish lessons for just pickleball specifically. So that would be something we'd look at. There is a demand. I can say that when we offer those sell out really quickly. I think there's a desire to learn. So we would definitely take a look at that.
Great. Thank you. If there aren't any other burning questions at this moment, I'd love to open it up for public comment. If I could ask our city clerk team here, can you give us a sense of how many speaker cards we have? And then if folks are listening on Zoom, if you'd raise your hand at this time if you'd like to speak.
So at this time, we have 11 speakers in the chambers, and I see 3 speakers online at the moment.
Okay,
Wait,
great.
1, 2, 3, 5.
Okay,
5
great.
online.
So we're going to feel free to turn in your cards if you haven't already. And at this point, we are going to keep to 2 minutes, if that's okay. And with that, I'll ask you to call our first speaker.
Okay, thank you. In the chambers, correct?
Sure. Yes, please.
So our first speaker is Lester Ellis.
No, he said he's.
Followed by Jeff Trowbridge.
I know you're saying to yourself, not again. I want to thank our new city manager, Ms. Moore, and Shelley for doing such an excellent job. I can just endorse it 100%. I'm not speaking for the whole community, but that's my thought. I want to make a point that over the 6 years that we've been trying to develop a pickleball program, we have never come to you or the Recreation Department and said no. Everything that's been brought up has been discussed. We have worked with you, you've worked with us, to accomplish a workable relationship to advance pickleball in the community. Another thing that maybe is not as well known among you and is the fact that I periodically get calls. Before COVID, there was a Play Like a Girl Day. I got a call, could you recruit some women to coach these youngsters? And I sent out a notice, immediately got a big response, because that's the kind of people we are. Then recently, we had another Play Like a Girl Day, and again, the call went out. And we had about 24 men and women show up to help. Some of the youngsters are just this high. They're just so sweet to see. Tuesday, there is a similar event for young girls, and we again have been asked to provide the tutors, the teachers, without pay, and our group has stepped forward again without hesitation. If you adopt the program, and I really hope you do, that has been proposed, those 4 hours where youth are going to be playing pickleball, I would not at all be surprised if someone called me and said, could you get some women together and some guys together to give them a little instruction? And
Sorry,
we would
Mr.
do that
Ellis.
when you're ready. And I apologize for taking more than 2 minutes.
You're okay. Just
Thank you for all you
okay.
do.
Thank you. Thank you for wrapping up your comment. We appreciate you being here, Mr. Trowbridge.
Hello, City Council and City Administrator. I'm Jeff Trowbridge, a 40-year Piedmont homeowner and taxpayer. All 3 of my kids went to beach school. My granddaughter now attends beach school. I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Linda Beach neighborhood. I want to thank you for all the care and attention you've paid to this very important matter. I was the pickleball group's representative to the working group, and I appreciate the time that the City Administrator spent with us. And we spent a lot of time presenting a proposal to her that required a lot of coordination between pickleball players, and as you said in your comments, did not meet everyone's approval, but not everyone was happy, but we thought it was a fair accommodation. And so I'm here to urge you to adopt the City Administrator's recommendation to create a vibrant venue for a healthy, social, and safe recreation activity here in Piedmont. At the Linda Beach courts, I've played pickleball with a person with Parkinson's disease, whose doctor recommended play for his balance and movement, a person recovering from a stroke, a person treating for cancer, finding respite between his surgeries and treatments. Many persons in my situation who have lost spouses. We've discovered a social and healthy activity to combat loneliness. And of course, the kids. It was wonderful to see the excitement of the beach school and schoolmates' kids. They enjoyed and benefited from the youth programming during our trial. Many Piedmont kids have been out on the courts throughout the summer. High school and college kids have been bringing their moms to play pickleball on the Linda Beach courts. The Linda Beach area is a wonderful place to be. I'm convinced that your decision this evening in favor of dedicated pickleball courts is going to make it even a more desirable and valuable place to be in Piedmont. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. And thank you also for your participation in the subcommittee. We appreciate that. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Gary Robinson, followed by Lisa Neville.
Hello, Mr. Robinson.
Oh, I'd really like to thank the City Council and the staff and the Recreation Commission for all the great work you've been doing. And I'm one of those who's over 80 years old and recommended by the doctor to get out and do more exercise. And I've been going to Linda Beach 2 and 3 times a week, and it's really fabulous. Not only for the exercise, but for the community, it's great. And it get a chance to work. I played a game where I had 3 teenagers I was playing against, and they were all beginners, and they're all great. I wish that my own son would come out, and I'm going to try to get him to come out and play too. I really urge you to take and support the commission, the report that's recommended. I think it's going to work out great for the pickleball community, and I think for everybody else. So I really thank you.
Thank you. I hope you beat those teenagers. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Neville. I'm at 138 Sunnyside.
Ms. Neville.
Wow. I guess I'm going to repeat this because I said this last meeting. I don't think you've heard anything that the neighbors have said. I don't care what any of you say or how any of you feel. This is the most frustrating situation I've been in this neighborhood. I've lived there for 45 years. I raised 2 kids who went to beach school too. I have 2 grandkids at beach school. I was a scoutmaster. I got the Beaver Award. I was room mothers I don't know how many years. The candy person for Campfire Girls, blah, blah, blah. That's all great. Our neighborhood is surrounded by people who are, a lot of them in the medical profession, who work funky hours, as we all do, and they sleep during the day and they sleep during the evening when all this noise is going on. So I am compelling you to please not pass this and reconsider, because it doesn't belong in a canyon. It doesn't belong in a neighborhood. In light of the fact that there's a problem going on in Walnut Creek and there's a problem going on in San Francisco, all throughout the country and in parts of the world, that pickleball is being excluded from neighborhoods. It doesn't belong in a neighborhood. I don't know how else to say that. Why has that not crossed your minds? It doesn't belong at Linda Beach. It just doesn't.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Kara Christensen, followed by Fanny Terra.
Hi, Ms. Christensen.
Hi, I'm Kara Christensen. I was the neighborhood representative on the working group with Director Putzer and City Administrator Bayon Moore. I gotta say, it's really difficult to come up here, partly because I like to think of myself as a generous person who likes to give and doesn't like to say no. But I have to say that this proposal is really bad for our neighborhood. People might have the misconception that the Linda Beach neighborhood is, subject to constant traffic, that we live next to some sort of freeway situation, or that it's akin to like a constant activity on the playfield. It's not. There are times when the neighborhood is quiet. There are times when, the traffic dies down and there's not a lot of activity on the playfield. Those are the moments that we cherish and we deserve to have and to retain. So pickleball interferes with that. I gotta say, the last time the city council had the opportunity to vote on pickleball, the schedule, as Director Putzer described, was approved in 2020, 3 hours, 2 days a week, for 6 hours total. PRD added 1 day in 2022. The 9-hour schedule should be the benchmark by which you are evaluating this change. This is now, we're going up from 9 hours a week to as much as 60 hours a week. That is a more than 600% increase in the usage of this facility for pickleball. We might be talking about now a schedule from 9 to 7. That's 10 hours a day of pickleball. So it's better maybe than the trial, which was 12, but 10 hours a day, 5 days a week is a lot of pickleball to listen to when you're inside your home, which some of my neighbors are. They can hear inside their homes. So I really encourage you to think about that perspective, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate your comments and appreciate your work on this subgroup as well. Thank you. Next speaker. Hi, Ms. Thierry.
Hi, my name is Franny Lahutier. I'm a 22-year-old resident of Piedmont at 101 Nova Drive, and I also went to Piedmont High School. So I just wanted to share my experience with pickleball in Piedmont. So over the past few months, I started playing. I became part of this growing pickleball community in our city, and I think one of the most fantastic aspects of this sport is the accessibility to beginners. So I'd never played before, and I just improved immensely, like many others, since the beginning of the summer. And it just really makes it a fantastic choice for kids and people of all age to come and play. I've also not only learned to love the game, but the whole community, and they have been the most welcoming, and in general, it's been an immensely enjoyable experience. I think one of the standout moments of this summer was a few weeks ago when more than 10 of my friends that also all graduated from Piedmont High School came to play with us at Linda. And as I mentioned, like, playing pickleball has introduced me to this incredible community, welcoming and friendly group of people, and I think my friends were just as impressed by the diverse group of people of all ages coming together to enjoy this sport. So I think it's really special, and it's an activity that brings everyone out to be active together and bonds our community, and I wanted to share my perspective and just say thank you for providing this opportunity, and I hope we can continue to play in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lahutieri. Thank you for coming. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Jeff Nguyen, followed by Joe Phillips.
Hi, Mr. Nguyen. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Councilman and Mayor, and City Administrator and Director. I didn't come here with a prepared statement or anything. Just want to bring up the fact that the last weekend I went to Piedmont Middle School to play, and the game lasts about 12 minutes, and I have to sit around 30 to 40 minutes in between games. So we really need extra space for games for us to play. I understand that the proposal that the city administrator and director came up will not make anybody happy. It's not going to help me in terms of playing during the day, during the weekday. It's not going to make the neighbor happy, but that's what the spirit of compromise is. And I thank you for trying to bring different fractions of the community together and try to come up with some kind of compromise. And I hope the city will approve that. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, please.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for all of you and your time on this matter. I know it's pretty divisive. I come from a professional background of wealth of knowledge for health and wellness. And this particular topic brings a community together, and it also divides us. I'm sad to say some of the intimidating factors from some of our neighbors coming down to the court when I had kids out there trying to encourage them to play. This particular sport is supposed to bring us together, not divide us. I would like to say that I believe we can actually do this together. I live by Linda Beach. I hear all the soccer games. I hear the paddleball from pickleball. But We all have to use the space together and figure out how to compromise with this. Me picking somebody out, saying they're too loud. I'm out there at 6 a.m. People are playing soccer in the morning. I hear them, see them. It's not authorized. They're not bothering anybody, but I don't hear any other neighbors complaining. The other thing I'd like to say is, for all the people that do complain about it, then how come they're not here tonight? Look at all the people that play pickleball. It's a bigger problem for the people that want to play than the people that don't. So I appreciate your consideration for adopting the measure. Thank you.
Also, optionally, if you would, sorry, 1 second, if you would, you're not required to, but if you would say your name for the record, if you'd like.
My name is Joe Phillips of 1020 Oakland Avenue.
Great, thank you, Mr. Phillips, for being here. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Bruce Jaffe, followed by Lisa Tuck.
Hello, Mr. Jaffe.
Hello.
Hi.
I live at 902 Rose Avenue. I walk my dog on the beach dog path several times a day. And I'm really glad to see so many people playing pickleball. It's just amazing. Lots of people are engaged, and it's wonderful from a recreation point of view. But I gotta say, pop, 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 that sound is very annoying. And some of my friends on Sunnyside, where I used to live, and my friends on Howard, find it worse than annoying. That's a canyon there, and the sound reverberates back and forth. It's not a question of the decibels, the volume of the sound. It's the impact sound. It's that constant popping, popping, popping. And if you just walk by it for a while, it's nice, and you see it, but when you have to experience it all the time, it's worse than annoying. And I'm concerned, as a Piedmont resident and taxpayer, that if 1 or 2 residents there sue the city because it's depressing their property values, we all have to pay for that. That's just not the right place for pickleball all day, every day. The arrangement that I heard sounds like pickleball all day, 6 days a week. I would suggest a better compromise is 2 days at least of silence. 2 or 3 days of pickleball in the morning, like 9 to 2 or 10 to 2, and 3 or 2 days of pickleball in the afternoon, like 2 to 6. But having 6 days a week of pickleball almost all day long is just really very annoying and horrible for the residents who live there. So I thank you for that. I'll just say, this last month, walking around,
Actually,
all
just
of
to
a sudden,
clarify,
silent.
if you would wrap up your statement, you're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Ms. Tuck?
Hello, I'm Lisa Tuck, and I live at 7 Monticello Avenue, Piedmont. I've been a Piedmont resident for 42 years, and I'm here tonight speaking for myself and my immediate neighbor at 4 Parkway, Ruby Gudzar, a senior at Piedmont High. I think you've heard from her before. She wanted to speak to you, but has to lay out the school newspaper tonight as part of her editorial duties. We both request that the council members implement the recommended hours submitted and not consider further cuts. Please. With this proposed plan, the hours are down 46% from the trial period, a large loss. Right now, we often wait 45 minutes to play a 15-minute game, and it's very frustrating. Worse, many students and worker bees have disappeared altogether in the last month or so. They deserve to be dealt a fair hand. We know your mission is to do the greatest good for the greatest number in our community. Ruby and I look forward to your decision. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Our next speaker is Teddy King, followed by Kurt Fleischer.
Hello, Ms. King.
Well, hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Teddy King, and former mayor of this great city, and 8-year member of the Piedmont City Council and formerly on the Recreation Commission. I just want to offer my strong support for the staff in bringing these recommendations to our beloved City Council. Staff has worked tirelessly in many challenging circumstances to come up with a proposal that can really address the needs of the largest number of residents here in Piedmont. It has been no easy feat. I was a member of City Council back when pickleball was first brought to the dais here, and I was part of the effort to give it a shot. Well, giving it a shot has been a tremendous success for so many Piedmonters. I will say, in addition to my views as a former council member, I will just repeat what some of you already know. When my mom passed away in 2021, my dad sold his house and moved in with me here in Piedmont. And it was a tremendous loss for everyone in my family. But the first group that he was able to join and find camaraderie with was the pickleball community. The pickleball members opened up their arms and greeted my dad, and he loved the game, and he's a natural athlete. And it made what was a tremendous life-changing transition so much easier. And that really is the spirit of this sport. So I know that it is not a perfect scenario. Nothing is. But I do want to just offer my tremendous appreciation to staff for your dedication in bringing us to this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King, and thank you for your years of service, and thank you for acknowledging our hardworking staff. We can't say that enough. So thank you for that. Hello, Mr. Fleischer.
Hi, I'm Kurt Fleischer. I live at 112 Sunnyside. Thank you all for the time and effort you've put into this. You know, at the beginning of this year, I would have said, I still would say, I'm so lucky to be part of two really wonderful, vibrant communities, the Linda Beach community and my neighbors at Sunnyside, and the pickleball community. And it's been my personal misfortune to have these two committees collide heavily on this issue, which has been really hard. So, and I was sad to hear that the attempt to find a compromise solution didn't go as well as hoped. But I would really urge you to look into physical mitigation methods on the walls of that court. We don't know if that will make a big difference or any difference, but I would love to see us try hanging some construction blankets or something. I saw the various things mentioned in the Salter report. I would really appreciate that. Second thing I wanted to mention briefly, the topic of self-policing came up, and I just want to give you anecdotal evidence of what I witnessed in the past 3 days. Usually I think the pickleball community is pretty good at self-policing. I happen to live in the neighborhood, so I was walking by there on Saturday night, and I saw somebody playing at 8 o'clock at night over the tennis nets, and this young couple, and I stood there for a few minutes debating whether or not I felt comfortable and that I should interrupt them. I decided not to, but while I was dithering, they stopped and walked away, so that I didn't have to worry about it. But I did see on Sunday at 12:58 p.m. everybody taking down the nets at Linda Beach and closing up, and Sunday evening at PMS I was there and at 5, and I reminded people that that was the end of our hours, and no one argued with me. Everyone just took the equipment down and put it away, and I was so happy that that people were compliant, and it's a pretty easy community. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your efforts to keep our nets working and personally hand sewing them in your family somehow. Anyway, appreciate that too. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Rick Schiller, followed by Julie Nevis.
Thank you. Mr. Schiller.
Good evening, Mayor, Kavanaugh, and Council. Rick Schiller, 43 Fairview. After an exhaustive and thorough process, the Recreation Commission overwhelmingly recommended the conversion of Linda Beach to dedicated pickleball and provided mitigation to the neighbors by recommending a reduction of hours of 25%. Even after the lengthy public process, with all the conditions satisfied, and I believe it was on the purvey of our city administrator, further meetings were arranged between pickleball and the neighbors. At those meetings, the original position of the neighbors was no pickleball. I felt that was, eventually they then offered the original 9 hours a week. So really there was no negotiation in good faith, and I was bothered by that. The neighbors argue the city noise report is false. The city does not and cannot operate in that manner. Our staff is much too professional, and there's far too much liability in crafting bad reports and violating in-place laws. I ask you to approve both the Rec Commission and the staff report before you as to the recommended hours, the reduced hours. As the late afternoon hours are critical for Piedmont children and for working adults, you might consider shifting the hours a little bit later to accommodate this large group of people while still retaining, not giving us more hours than recommended, but still giving the neighbors significant mitigation. That's a couple of other quick comments to my friend Bruce's thing about lowered property values. We don't know that. The single commissioner, Rec Commissioner Verani, that voted against the trial and the recommendation for pickleball, commented early on, the jury's out on that. It's possible that values are raised by having pickleball. People move into a recreation area because that's what they desire. Last comment, there's something very unique about pickleball. I don't recall if it was Miss Long or Miss Anderson who asked about open play to children play. Pickleball, we have 10-year-olds playing with 85-year-olds. Nothing else like that in Piedmont exists.
Mr. Schiller, if you wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry to go on.
Last speaker is Julie Nevis.
Hi, my name is Julie Nevis. I live at Linda Avenue. I'll just try to read this as quickly as I can. So I can't impress upon you how disheartening it was to read the report from the city administrator for restriping the Linda Beach courts and extending the hours beyond the current hours, particularly given the fact that the court is in a canyon setting and that the impulsive popping sound from the paddles negatively impacts not only the quality of life in the surrounding area, but also the general mental and emotional health of the surrounding neighbors. This unique sound is the biggest drawback for any city looking to expand pickleball in their community. Given the fact that there are several options for noise mitigation, it's surprising that the only recommendation for noise offered by both the city and the pickleball community is to require the use of city-approved noise equipment, low noise equipment. But enforcement is not guaranteed, and even if it was, this type of equipment does little to actually reduce the decibels emanating from the courts. While the pickleball community puts forth a proposal for future sound dampening efforts, there's no real commitment to follow through. With a price ceiling of $30,000, while it seems generous, it's not enough to effectively mitigate the noise. The general rule of thumb for noise is that if you see the noise source, you can also hear it. This means that any sound barrier would need to be extremely tall or completely enclose the courts. There's also been a general disregard for the neighbors' experience. In response to many neighbors expressing a decline in their emotional and mental health, the pickleball community literally had no response. They just shifted the conversation to the health benefits and physical benefits of pickleball players, which I am not here to dispute. I know that there's a lot of that. I am hoping that the city officials would have more care and concern for their neighbors. As it stands today, pickleball is available several hours each day, every day of the week throughout the city. If expansion in pickleball is warranted, other more appropriate locations, such as Hampton, should be on the table for discussion. To approve restriping of Linda Beach courts to permanent pickleball use is an imprudent decision. Neither the city administrator nor the pickleball community has put forth a reasonable plan to address the noise issues at Linda Beach courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nevis. I appreciate you being here. Next speaker, please.
I have 6 speakers with hands raised. The first one is identified as Amy-Piedmont CA.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is Amy Valerie. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a difficult conversation. By definition, a difficult conversation means that both sides are coming to the group with some emotional involvement. here, both are here because of their physical and emotional health. To facilitate a difficult conversation, which you have been attempting to do, and we thank you for, but both sides must first come to the table accepting some basic facts. As Julie just said, in this situation for pickleball players, they very much enjoy their recreation and gain both social, emotional, and physical improvements. We have no medical data to say that that's unique to this sport, but we can look at the experience of players both inside and outside of our own community and validate it. But the second fact is that the neighboring homeowners are negatively impaired with impacts on their emotional and physical health as well. Pickleball is an impulsive noise, and there's research and medical literature that this type of noise has negative health consequences. We can also validate this in the testimony that you have heard throughout the past several months about the neighbors' experiences and how they're being impacted. Additionally, we can look outside of the community for this. The second part of having a productive approach to a difficult conversation is that you must approach it with curiosity. So this means that we have to look back and ask ourselves if our two sides came with curiosity. Was our sound study designed to look at what the impacts are? Did we do a sound study at the tot lot to see how this might impact those residents? Did we put up our microphones at the houses that are closest or at the houses that are complaining to prove them wrong? Were neighbors and pickleball players equally included or excluded in the conversation about the sound study? Did we seek out a qualified, experienced company to conduct this? If we can't answer these questions about coming to the table with curiosity and good faith, then we need to go back to the drawing board. Thank you so much for your time. I know my time is up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brian. I live at 104 Sunnyside. Thanks for your time this evening. I just want to say that no one, as you've heard among this neighborhood, is arguing that pickleball is a bad sport. We're arguing that pickleball is not appropriate to the Linda Beach site. We're not hysterical people who hate noise. We listen to school noise, basketball noise, lacrosse noise, baseball noise without complaint every day. The problem is pickleball noise and its location and its effect on our quality of life and the value of the property we pay enormous taxes on. Now, I'm sure we wouldn't be having this discussion if our testimony was given due weight and you all believe that this was a harmful nuisance that's affecting our lives and violates local law. I can only assume that moving forward with permanent restriping is premised on pickleball not being a nuisance or violation. This is evidenced, I suppose, by the Salter study, and we've tried to demonstrate with numerous communications that the study is flawed, both in its formulation between the city and specific pickleball representatives, as well as in its specific measurement methodologies. Moving forward with this restriping on this premise is an expensive and permanent decision that guarantees litigation. In that litigation, it's highly likely that pickleball will be found to be in violation of our local laws and ordinances. There's no reason to move forward right now with a 600% increase in pickleball, knowing that 10 hours per day, 6 days a week is too much. As we sit here, the Piedmont picklers, who number roughly 300 people, have hundreds of hours per week of playtime available to them at sites across Piedmont, including Linda Beach. If that's not enough for just a few hundred people, I would ask, is this court for Piedmont residents or is it for the greater Bay Area? Here's my request. Please don't vote today. Instead, do a proper sound study that's unbiased, follows the latest and best practices, and is crafted in collaboration with the local residents affected by this noise and not solely by the rec department and the pickleball community in isolation. The result of an actual study should inform whether or not we should proceed here at all, and if we do proceed, to what degree and how we mitigate it if necessary. Let's please learn from our neighbors in Walnut Creek and elsewhere around the country and not shoot ourselves in the foot, wasting precious budget on a bad initiative. Thank you.
Next call, please. Hi, Ms. Purcell.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Mary Purcell. I am a 13-year Piedmont resident. I live on Jerome Avenue, a block from Witter Field, so I am familiar with the sounds of vibrant recreational facilities that are loved by hundreds and thousands of people. I asked the council to adopt the staff report tonight without further cuts. I really appreciate the work that went into this. We've been at this for years. I've been an active volunteer for many years, which included finding people to open courts, set up nets, close down courts every single day at different courts around the city for years. We've done this enthusiastically because we love pickleball. It's time to have dedicated courts. Someone asked if the hours at Piedmont Middle or Hampton would be in lieu of Linda Beach. And I'd really like to emphasize that we still do not have enough court hours. Several times in the past few weeks, I have left the courts because I was going to have to wait more than half an hour for a 15 or 20-minute game. There are regularly 60 plus people at the middle school on the weekends. And during the week, the waits are excessive. We're losing players regularly, and that's not what we want. We have compromised all along the way to try to make this less unpleasant for the neighbors. We agreed to quieter balls. We agreed to quieter paddles. We agreed to limited hours. We offered to fundraise tens of thousands of dollars to put in noise mitigation panels. We are doing everything we can to try to reach a compromise with the neighbors. And I just like to emphasize, we have several neighbors who play pickleball, who live directly above the courts on Sunnyside and Howard, and they support this program. So please vote tonight. Please don't put this off any longer. I think you have all the information you need in that excellent report from the city staff. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Purcell. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Wilfred Tang.
Hello, Mr. Tang.
Hi, can you hear me? Great, thank you. So I'm Wilfred Tang. I live in Piedmont on Blair Avenue. I'd like to make a few points. So number one, I think the Linda Beach pickleball trial was a resounding success in terms of participation. I think it also was a success in terms of providing recreation opportunities and building community. I'll also add that many of the people I know and talk to in Piedmont are the direct result of playing pickleball in Piedmont. Number two, for a person like me who has a job and also a parent of school-age children, opportunities to play pickleball later in the day are important for me as well as my children. Since the Linda Beach pickleball trial ended, I've ended up playing more in Oakland rather than Piedmont because of the availability of play later in the day. That's good for building community for Oakland, not so much for Piedmont. Number three, the professional sound study demonstrated the sound is not excessive, especially in an area where there is a school and a recreational play field. That also seems consistent with what I've observed in neighboring communities in Oakland, where I'll point out that there is pickleball play on lighted courts in parks with the residences in the vicinity until 10 p.m. So in closing, I thank the city staff and city council for spending all the time on studying this. I urge Piedmont to make full use of Linda Beach for pickleball. It will benefit everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Amy Lyons.
Hello, I'm Amy, and I will keep this super short. I am one of those worker bees who loves to come after work and play at Linda Beach. It's the only time I can come is after work and on the weekends. So I urge you to pass this and not cut the hours. Not only are there adults there who work and come in these early evening hours, but there's lots of families there. It's always busy in the evening. I also urge you to keep the PMS hours. There's just such a huge demand. And I know it's not on the docket tonight, but keeping it free, it would also maintain the welcoming culture that the Piedmont pickleball community has really fostered. And it's a wonderful place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Next speaker, please.
The last speaker is Austin Godard.
Hi, City Council. Can you hear me well? Thank you.
I just wanted to thank the City Council and all those that have been involved in each evolution of the consideration of pickleball in Piedmont. I really recognize that this topic has many opposing views, and I just deeply appreciate the Council's thoughtfulness in this matter. I just want to quickly say that Linda Beach Pickleball brings people of all ages and backgrounds together. It fosters a strong sense of community, and it promotes an active and healthy lifestyle. And I was specifically encouraged by getting to play pickleball with some of Piedmont's first responders this weekend. It was a really fun way to interact with them and thank them for their service. And these connections were only possible because of the times the courts are open, allowing community members to play after school and after work. To put it succinctly, pickleball makes Piedmont better. It creates connection points for folks that would otherwise never meet. It encourages physical exercise, which we all know is also one of the best things we can do for our mental health. And finally, it's a very accessible sport, making it inclusive of so many. Please further invest in our community by dedicating the Linda Beach courts exclusively to pickleball, increase the availability of open play, and structure court hours to accommodate evening exercise. Thank you very much.
Any last call for speakers, either here in the chambers? Please bring a card up if you haven't spoken already, or raise your hand online if you'd like to speak. Great. With that, we will close public comment. And because your council are not camels, we are going to take a quick break, if that's good with for exactly 5 minutes. I have 8:22, so we're going to come back whether you're in your seats or not at 8:27. You're a social bunch, clearly, so talk amongst yourself. We'll be back in 5. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. We are going to reconvene. Thank you so much. So we have closed public comment on this, and I will turn to my colleagues for deliberation and discussion. Who'd like to kick us off? You don't have to get all your comments out in your first breath, but any initial thoughts from anyone? I know this, I'll just start with the fact that this has been, again, I wanted to express my gratitude for everyone who's been here, not only tonight, but for the many years we've been at this, for the countless emails, the thought and care and analysis that have gone into those. I'm confident that wherever we land tonight, that there will be some people happy in some way, perhaps, but many people, I'm confident we're never going to make everyone happy with this one. It's been a difficult one, but appreciate your patience and just know that we're doing our best. So, any thoughts?
I just had a question, actually, a follow-up question. And I think the staff already spoke to this, but I just wanted to confirm. In the time period since our last meeting, we had this working group talking. Did we have any unanimity or any movement regarding physical mitigation, reduction strategies? So several of the speakers brought that up. And I just want to make sure that we're not, I mean, it wasn't part of the staff report, but was it talked about in the working group?
We were unable to reach agreement that the installation of sound dampening material was adequate. The sticking point really centered on whether or not some additional work would, on the part of neighbors, was requested to be performed. Because the mitigation measure itself with installation would only be acceptable if it eliminated all sound associated with pickleball for all potential neighbors. Okay. So in the Salter study, there was a description of the benefits of a sound dampening material. Mm-hmm. That was deemed to be inadequate in its form as presented. Okay. So we weren't able to reach agreement on that being beneficial in the form presented.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. Any other questions?
Yeah, if we were to discuss a physical mitigation method, is there one that right now you could speak to that would be preferred, or would this be something that would need to be explored?
So the Salter technical memorandum calls out a variety of material types, and we've had our city engineer do some further investigation on prices associated with incorporating that particular feature into the renovation project. So if the council so directed, to include that form of mitigation in the future renovation project, we would incorporate it into the bid documents prior to advertising the project. It is not currently considered in the presented recommendation.
And to be clear, this recommendation was made with the belief that if we did do some sort of physical mitigation, it would reduce the sound to some decibel, and to some neighbors, maybe not all.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions?
Can I follow up?
Yeah, please.
That it would reduce the sound, but we don't know that that would be acceptable to the neighbors who have complained about sound.
Correct.
Okay.
One more follow-up on that.
Yeah,
So is there anything we're doing that will prevent that from happening in the future if funding or an agreement comes in?
No, should the council wish to proceed with mitigation in the future, that option would be available as an enhancement to the planned renovation project.
At what juncture?
At some future date, separate and apart from the renovation project.
And again, a follow-up on that. And so at this point, mitigation also isn't necessarily funded, but we believe that there is potentially some support in the community to potentially raise capital funds on a voluntary basis to help with that. Is that our understanding?
So the staff report includes 2 letters presented both from the neighborhood representative as well as the pickleball representative. At the conclusion of the working group, it was really important after several mentions by the pickleball representative that suggested there would be community support for providing an offset to the cost that the city may incur for noise dampening material installation. There were several representations or suggestions that there would be a willingness to raise funds for this. So I requested at the conclusion of the working group that that commitment be placed in writing, which is actually included in the backup to the staff report. And so at the time, the pickleball community, through its representative, had indicated a contribution in the ballpark of $30,000. We are estimating that to go from the current state of the property to an installed state of any of the materials recommended by Salter, that we would be in the realm of $80,000 to $110,000 or so additional to the project.
One final follow-up. So just to clarify then, the reason it's not in the report here is because the criteria couldn't be agreed to as to whether some mitigation was appropriate or total mitigation. Is that?
It was apparent in the exploration that incorporating the mitigation, I did share with our working group members that the current project description did not include this feature. The feature was not contemplated in the budget estimate, and that I would only move forward with incorporating this feature if it was the opinion of those present that it would be desirable for the individuals in the neighborhood. And so to be fair to the process, I think it was the neighborhood representative's indication that if anyone is experiencing sound and not addressed by a line of sight obstruction, then this was not a desirable form of mitigation. So if I could state that a different way, if there were any line of sight issues that remained for the pickleball court and any property owners, installation of the barrier as proposed would not be adequate.
Okay, helpful. Other questions?
Yes, and just to clarify, and I think this came out during comments, which is while we had representatives for both groups, there are some neighbors and perhaps some members of the pickleball communities who don't totally agree with what the representatives brought forth, right? So there may be neighbors in that community that feel like some kind of physical mitigation would be helpful. Because it wasn't part of the recommendation, I'm assuming that we haven't had an in-depth follow-up conversation about what information we would need to actually move forward with it. We have sort of a general idea of different materials, but not necessarily, okay, if you really want to eliminate sound. I think part of what we've heard from some of the residents is we're in a canyon and maybe these wouldn't be satisfactory, but we haven't really clarified that yet, or have we?
The Salter Technical Memorandum does refer to equivalent materials that they would recommend as having a observable impact on the reduction of pickleball sound in particular. So I do think if we were to move forward with the mitigation measure to dampen sound physically at the site, we would have an option to work through the alternatives presented by Salter and incorporate into bid documents any one of those materials as a suitable sound dampening option.
Okay. Other questions? Otherwise, we can continue on with comments in our deliberation. Okay.
I could ask another question, but so I know what's before us tonight is Linda Beach. I just had a question about striping because there has been some community input asking about the use of other courts around town. And I think maybe, we here at the dais understand kind of the striping issues that are involved with pickleball, dual use of pickleball and tennis, but I'm not sure everyone in the community is aware of that. I don't know if anyone can speak to that.
Do you want me to walk through the general orientation? Of course, if you have anything to augment there. So the Salter study.
Actually, I'm asking about all the courts in the whole city. Like people say, why can't we play pickleball at the Quarry Reach, or why can't we play pickleball at the park courts, at the near Guilford? And my understanding is there's a striping issue that's related to competition play. But if we could just clarify that for the community so they understand what the context is.
That's correct. So Quarry Beach Tennis Center is used as the home courts for our girls and boys varsity and JV tennis teams. And we early on tried to reach out to CIF and USTA just to get their recommendations. They do. You can do it, but it causes confusion in match play because of the competing lines and making calls on courts. And so. That's why that court has been kind of preserved as the match court. Park courts is a backup for the high school when they have tournaments play, and so that has remained unstriped for pickleball as well.
And I've had people. I mean, we don't control what happens with the city of Oakland, but people have asked me about the Davies Tennis Center. But that is also a place for competition, tennis competitions. My understanding is they have the same kind of striping issues if we're using them for tournaments. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a recommendation. So I'm in our pause here. We have a recommendation before us from staff, which is a modification of the recommendation that came to us from the Rec Commission. And I did want to call out our Rec Commission chair and subcommittee member Dick Carter, who's also here and have participated. So again, appreciate you and all the work that you and your committee have put into this. So we have a recommendation before us, and we can discuss what's here. And at some point, we'll look for a motion from this group to give direction to staff. And either approve what's here or modify what's here based on our feedback.
We had several folks remind us, pickleball players, that they need access or are looking for access to courts after a regular working day. So the question is there some flexibility without adding to the hours that staff has proposed? Is there some flexibility in how those hours are
Should council wish to move forward with the form of the hours in total as presented, there's a number of ways to do that. There's kind of a complicated, when you look at the 12 months of the year and when sunset happens, we're going to find that there are periods of the year where we won't make it to 6 o'clock, or that well beyond 6 o'clock is available. So what we attempted to do was recognize daylight savings time. What we could do if there was a cap on the number of hours but a wish to shift it into later play in the day is slide back the start time to a later time in a manner that captures more end of the day daylight hours. So that isn't something that is presented here in any way other than recognizing that daylight savings time does create a longer set of opportunities. So we propose adding to it with the idea that in total it might kind of balance the number of days that are shorter days in a calendar year.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just follow up. So you had mentioned earlier that you chose the 9 o'clock start time for consistency so people would know what to expect. With usage and just kind of understanding how things are running, if we had some days at 9 and some days at 10, would that be problematic?
I want to speak to have our rec director speak to why it was important to maintain the 9 hour start time, 9 a.m. start time.
I think it really helps with the confusion of the time, but it's not unheard of in some of our field use or times that schedules that we have, but it does create the expectation that people know when the courts would open, which does help with someone showing up at 9 and wanting to play, and it doesn't open until 10 just because they don't know. But I don't think it's set in stone in terms of.
I also want to clarify, so my understanding is the recommendation, should we move forward, would be that we potentially use these facilities on a permanent dedicated basis according to whatever hours we agree to tonight. And then at some point, we do need to shut the facility down so that after we get through the bidding process, we can actually begin construction. So there's a dead zone there, and then we potentially reopen the facility. So it feels like we have this potential window to launch something tonight, whatever that might be if we decide to go down that path, and then we potentially can close it and potentially rejigger and evaluate at that point. I'm wondering if we can come up with some, I don't know if any of us want to get in the weeds to exactly be prescriptive on hours, other than like, here's general principles that we feel like we could be comfortable with, recognizing that if this were to tweak over time and perhaps at the reopening after construction, that might be a time to potentially rejigger hours, potentially with input from community members, neighbors, pickleball players, et cetera, in terms of what hours feel like they're meeting the most. I mean, I think our goal is, if we're moving forward, to just meet the most needs that we can, recognizing that not everyone can play at the same time.
And I guess just point of clarification, right now, some of the evening hours are happening at the middle school. Right?
Yes. Right.
Okay, so it's not that we don't have hours, it's just that they're not at Linda. Okay. But apparently they're never enough. Yes, but I think that's true no matter how many hours we schedule. I think that the Bay Area and the country is experiencing that. So there doesn't appear to be a ceiling yet on how much people want to play pickleball.
Would there be a way to rejigger or adjust hours to accommodate daylight savings time without adding the extra hour?
Absolutely.
In the summertime?
I think there could be, and if I'm looking at a schedule of when dusk hits 12 months in the year, come spring, let's just say for the sake of argument that in April, all the renovations are complete, we're ready to reopen. We would find that sunset or dusk occurs between 8 and 8:30 p.m. So we could adjust the hours to maybe delay the start time to a later morning and push into evening, more evening hours that were more conducive to people with traditional work hours.
And I think related to that, I think, I'll just put out there, I think for me, it also depends on how much we have access to the middle school. I know when days that the community has only had access to the middle school, there is 24 people playing and 40 people waiting, so I know that's still not enough. But to the extent that can be offset, there's still only, if we move forward with this, there's still only 4 courts at Linda Beach, so that's clearly, there's way more demand than that too. So there might be some times that we feel like both can be met, such as weekends. During the trial, we had both locations available during the weekend hours, and both were maxed out. So it feels like we don't want to scale back the weekends anymore. And in fact, in the original trial, I think we also had weekend evenings. So I don't know if that's an option at the middle school to consider weekend evenings, but anyway, I think trying to figure out how we balance that. But I think that's what I would look to staff to try to get input from the community to make sure we're maximizing when people have demand and that we're just making the best use of both facilities, assuming that we're able to continue to partner with the school and access the middle school spaces. Okay.
I just wanted to go back to a second because I know we are really all trying our level best to recognize the growing sport of pickleball and the concerns raised by neighbors. So I know the working group did not have any specific requests vis-a-vis hours and or physical mitigation, and so that's not why it's contained herein. Is there an option, let's say we adopted some or some modified version of this, should the neighbors come forward to ask for or seek physical mitigation? It sounded like we could be open to that. Or would that be something that would need to come back to us? So for example, if the neighbors came back to you and said, hey, listen, we've heard, we don't think that these, we didn't agree to physical mitigation before, but now we're here, we would really like to have physical mitigation, some form. How would that ever get back to us? What would be the process?
So the ideal time to install mitigation, if there were resources allocated to accomplish it, would be at the time of renovation, so that the disturbance that's associated with the site, that all of the work could be performed at the same time. We are currently intending to do some stronger fence posts and materials installation as part of the project, minus the noise dampening material. Should the council wish, after the renovation project, to move forward with sound dampening measures, we'd have an opportunity to do so with less disturbance than starting from scratch. So, the ideal time would be at the time of renovation. We are moving forward in a manner that, should a future desire to incorporate that feature be the direction that this council wishes to go and the city wishes to go, then we would pursue the installation of the material at that time and potentially, take the court out of use for a short period of time to accomplish that improvement.
Okay. Just for clarity, there would be some cost savings to do it at the time of construction as opposed to coming back later.
Correct, yeah. Well, you've already got a contractor on site. Right. You're accomplishing it all at once. The lack of availability of the court,
Yeah, I just wanted to put a
But if I can follow up,
point on that.
We don't have funds available.
I agree. We don't have funds available.
I mean, not that we've been told. We don't have. No.
You were saying 110,000 for what were you?
It's in the 80 to 110 realm. Our set aside for the court renovation project is $200,000 in the capital improvement or facilities program for this project. Yeah.
And potentially a $30,000 contribution or fundraising campaign from the pickleball community towards that $80,000.
And to clarify, the $200,000 is what we would spend regardless of what we painted on this court. So
correct.
Yeah.
So, it's the surface improvement, the tree removal, all of the the work regardless of what future purpose it is. It's to get it back in a proper state in the manner that our capital improvement program envisions for all of our courts.
Great. Okay. Okay, so just taking a look at time, I'm not hearing any other questions. Are there any other, we have a recommendation before us. Are there any other thoughts or comments in terms of what we want to see, what needs to happen in order to move us forward with the decision?
Well, if there's an opportunity, as you suggested, to rejigger the hours, then maybe we don't need to have that extra time assigned for daylight savings. Would you agree with that?
I think that is definitely an option available to council. And we're happy to work with the wishes of the body to adapt, to kind of flex in a way that makes those later hours possible for.
So what does that bring us to? How many hours does that bring us to? Just removing those?
This is, just to clarify, this is the 1 hour daylight savings extension.
Additional 5 hours a week, I think.
It would be an additional 5 hours a week. Excuse me, 1, 2,
6 hours,
3,
6 hours,
6 hours a
Removing
week.
6 hours.
And at times of year when the dusk extends beyond 6 p.m.
Yes.
So I think if you, if I heard you correctly, what you described is a cap on the number of hours in the week and then shifting, a desire to see flexible scheduling that shifts when that time occurs.
To accommodate our folks who come in after work, yes.
And is that if there aren't hours at the middle school or in addition to hours at the middle school?
I think
Usage has shown in addition to.
Right. But I think, again, this is where I think it would be great to have demand drive that. So if we see that, as we know on weekends, all 10 courts between the middle school and Linda Beach, we're hearing, are full. So if that's true of evenings, we may need to shift more to the evenings. But if it seems like the middle school really accommodates the evening demand, then perhaps keeping more of the availability here during the daytime. But I think we're really just looking to try to balance out the use around town if we need to double down where there's tons of demand at that time to meet people who work in the evening or youth who want to play. We might need double, but otherwise if we can spread it out and we have the partnership with the middle school, that's where I would love to give our director, in partnership with our school district, the flexibility to try to figure out what's the right balance. Again, and at some point I think we're hoping to shake out a schedule that we can stick with for some amount of time until we reevaluate. So we're not looking at this every other month.
So I have a little concern about that because I feel like the neighbors should have some level some predictability about when they will have relief from the pickleball sound. So I think that if there is play somewhere else, it seems like we're not giving an opportunity to address neighbor concerns that we know are there. So I'm not sure how we balance that. I mean, I think that if there are hours at the middle school or Hampton, and we're also saying we're going to shift the hours potentially every month or so forth.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I may have misspoken. What I'm trying to say is I'm not looking to be prescriptive. I'm looking for our rec director to drive that. So what I was originally proposing was that we go forward with a schedule tonight because I think we want to move this forward and get back up and running with this facility that mostly has gone dark. Recognizing that in a few months we're gonna shut it down, and that may be the opportunity to say what's really been happening between the middle school and this space, and how might we rethink the space once it reopens. So I'm not looking at every week or every month that we're reevaluating hours, but that once we have some experience with this operational again in a new form with the middle school, then look to our rec director with input from users in the community to figure out should we shift and have more evening here or not. If the middle school really accommodates it, then we wouldn't really need to shift it. That's what I was proposing.
So you're saying 51 hours, but reevaluate.
There was a question as to whether we want to have some shift into the middle school, and I think it's a question of, as we're working with the middle school, if we actually have middle school space and that really accommodates the needs, then these hours potentially could be sufficient because these are hours that aren't currently covered by the middle school.
I didn't quite follow that, but I think you're agreeing with this time frame, right?
And giving the rec director the latitude to really, if we feel like there's a shift that needs to happen in the hours based on where we're seeing the demand, that, you know, at the time that we close the facility down would be the time when we reopen it to then say, okay, here's the ongoing hours.
You're not proposing to increase the hours.
No, I mean, I think we've sort of hit on what we think is the right, I don't know that this is a magic number in any way, that this is the exact right number of hours. It's clearly never going to be enough hour, you know, it currently isn't enough hours for the demand that we have. I think we believe that to be true, but I think it feels like it's a decent compromise.
So what is our number? Is it 51?
I think the number of hours we have laid out in here feels
50.
like.
I think it is
51.
But with the-
We're not going to change, we're not going to add.
No, that's it. The
I think
daylight.
the daylight hours.
Yeah.
And then just to, there is in the staff report a recommendation to revisit the court use on an annual basis. And I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I don't know if we're going to talk about that now or talk about that later, but I don't want anyone to think that what we're talking about tonight in terms of hours are set in stone, right? I mean, these are hours that could decrease, they could increase, they could change, they could shift. This is an unknown for us at this point in time, and I don't want to necessarily have this council commit future council to any certain hours.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that, and I would say that's exactly how we ended the conversation of the subcommittee for tennis and pickleballs. We could not predict how this sport would blow up to the extent and that the demands would be so great. So we don't know what's going to happen. So dedicated, but I think I've said to a few community members in emails, I've responded, dedicated but not permanent. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
But permanent, what we're talking about tonight is permanently striping it.
Striping it, right.
Permanently
Right.
for the next,
Right.
what's the cycle for 10 years?
Yeah.
For pickleball and putting in the pickleball nets.
Yeah.
Did we, I don't know that we've landed anywhere with respect to the physical mitigation, right? Do we feel like, I mean, I think that, I don't know that we know the answer right now to whether or not that is going to be a solve for neighbor concern. But we do believe, based on our experts' opinion, that this would reduce the sound to some extent. Is this something we want to table? Is this something we want to decide on tonight? Because I think that whatever we can do to address neighbor concerns is, you know, I'm for that.
What I heard from the conversation we just had was that we're open to the conversation, but there was no movement earlier with the working groups in any positive direction, but that if neighbors, and not all neighbors are opposed, just the neighbor folks who are opposed, because we have some neighbors who are proponents of pickleball at beach. If those neighbors were approachable to continue that conversation or to reinitiate that conversation. I don't know what else we could resolve tonight.
But I did hear that there's some preparation by strengthening the fence posts that are going in, that if that conversation did happen, there are some, if criteria, consensus, and funding is available, we're doing what we can do now by providing heavy-duty posts, right, in order to accommodate something.
Okay, so to summarize what I'm hearing for this, just given where we are, so I'm hearing that there, and just, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing that there's support for the rec commission recommendation and then the staff recommendation to dedicate and restripe the courts as laid out in the recommendation, to go forward with effective immediately the court hours that are here, but eliminating the kind of add-on for daylight savings time. And that would be the hours initially, and what I was suggesting is that at some point when the facility is ready to reopen, that would be the time that if staff felt like we needed to tweak the hours and communicate that to neighbors in the community, et cetera, that might be a time to do that, but that this would be the preliminary hours, assuming that middle school is a supplement to these hours. And then we're going to continue to go forward with the low noise equipment recommendation and really rely on the pickleball community to help educate and enforce that. Thinking about fee scenarios, whether that's a potential capital fundraising, if that is needed. We've heard support from that, as well as potential annual fees or other things that staff might consider. And then, hopefully come back. It feels like the time that the court is open feels like the time to potentially give an update. And then, as was noted, potentially revisiting this on an annual basis because this has changed over the years. I don't think any of us can predict where this is headed. This does feel like a bit of a tsunami of pickleball that's hit our community and every other community, and we're doing our best. I think we're playing a lot of catch up, but we're doing our best in a community that has very limited space and resources and more demand than we can meet for anything we want to do. So it feels like revisiting that in some capacity would make sense on an annual basis. So that's where we are. Any other thoughts on that or any changes or tweaks? And if not, then I would look for a motion on that. Or a change.
I can move the motion. I can make the motion for the recommendation as amended by the discussion that we've had this evening. Hopefully that's clear.
I was going to say, could I be a little more?
Yes. I'll let you make the motion.
Okay, that's what I get for saying. I would make the motion if this is agreeable, and I would eliminate the first asterisk underneath the hours.
Okay.
And I think also with the understanding that daylight savings time can be accommodated by, shifts there as deemed appropriate. That doesn't need to come back to us. But that we're not increasing hours as is referenced in that first asterisk.
Understood. So otherwise, the motion is to go forward with the recommendation with that change.
Yeah, red line that one asterisk.
Moved by Councilmember Ramsey. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Anderson. With that, we'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. With that, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much again. Thank you to staff. Thank you for everyone for being here tonight. Thank you for your patience. With that, we are done with our regular agenda item. We will move on to announcements, reports from council members, and discussion of future agenda items.
Let it clear.
With that, I'll turn to my colleagues. Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, I will turn to my colleagues for reports and any announcements. Yes, Vice Mayor Anderson.
Yes, the League of Women Voters is having a very exciting day on September 13th. There are 2 programs that folks can participate in. One is a Zoom program in the morning at 11 o'clock, another momentous year in the Supreme Court, and that is a presentation by Dean of the UC Berkeley School of Law, Edwin Chermin. I should know how to say his name because I think I took a law review class with him. Do you want to say it? Chemerinsky? I think so. Okay. All right. Let's go with that.
Enough lawyers in here. Someone should know.
Thank you very much. So he's doing a presentation to kind of the greater group of League of Women Voters, and that's September 13th at 11 a.m. and you can register for that on Zoom. And then in the afternoon, there's actually an in-person town hall with Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price, and that's going to be in Fremont, and that's going to be, 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. You do need to register for that event, and you can register through lwvpiedmont.org.
Great, thank you. Other reports?
Yeah, I will announce that Coffees, Cups, and Cars returns to Piedmont on, my screen is messed up, September 23rd from 9 to noon. So this event is used to build meaningful connections and community relationships with Piedmont Police Department while enjoying a look at classic and exotic cars driven from around the Bay Area. Car enthusiasts are invited to join our police officers in appreciating these vehicles.
Sorry.
While sharing a cup of coffee. And I'm also, just as another public safety announcement, at our meeting on September 18th, Chief Bowers will be giving his quarterly report on safety. We've been getting a lot of inquiries about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
I'd like to tag on to the Cops on a Block. There was one last night near my neighborhood, so I went. It wasn't very well attended because it was Labor Day, but it was great hanging out with a few cops in the street. I encourage everybody to watch when it's in your neighborhood. It's really great to go and meet our cops on the block.
And those times and places are usually listed in the Exedra.
Yeah. So have a look.
Great.
And then I was just gonna add on, the Harvest Festival is coming. I mean, it's gonna be a busy weekend. Did you mention that already?
No, I didn't.
Because I was thinking about coffee and cars. So I think that Coffee, Cups, and Cars is on the 23rd. And then the next day is the Harvest Festival.
24th.
So I think folks should plan to stay in town that weekend. There's lots of good stuff happening.
Nice. And that Friday night, we have PRDs. Did you want to talk about that? Movie night in the park?
Man, that's a
the
that's
22nd?
a stay-at-home. That's a destination
It is,
weekend in
yes.
Piedmont.
Yes, Friday night, the 22nd, they're showing Matilda.
So fun.
Yes. Anything else?
I'm good.
Great. So in addition to that, I just wanted to thank staff, thank Julie Gardner and her team, and Sarah Abel for their assistance with the Welcome to Piedmont event and for the partnership with the school district and folks who attended that event. Unfortunately, I was out of town, but I know it was really appreciated by new members to our community, and that was really the goal, is really to just keep it low-key and just have a fun event before our movie night in the park to welcome new families. So thank you to staff for helping make that happen. We also have coming to us from the Wellness Center at our high school is the Week of Wellness, starting on September 20th. And I just wanted to do a call out, one, to how important that programming is that they offer at the Wellness Center and how many students, they are completely oversubscribed in terms of who takes advantage of that. But there is an opportunity for folks to help fund that Week of Wellness and to participate as a family and as a community, and just knowing the mental health crisis that's going on. I just wanted to make sure we elevate that because it's as important now as ever. The night before that is the Piedmont Ed Foundation's new parent reception, which is for new families who are coming into the community. And we also have the Piedmont Art Walk, which is coming up on October 1st, which is an all-day art festival that some of that is happening in the middle of our town, as well as dispersed out into studios and homes throughout the community, which is amazing, a great way to showcase local artists. And that's what I have in terms of announcements. So if there's no other future agenda items or report outs, we will adjourn. Thank you all.